Welcome back to the channel. My name is Philip and I'm a landscape photographer based in the Midwest, and on this channel we talk about landscapes, nature, and traveling and how those go together. And on this video I'm going to show you how I turned this photo into this photo. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump over into Lightroom. So here in Lightroom, that's just my own preferred program to edit photos in. Anything or any program that can access raw files will work for this example, but I just prefer to use Lightroom. Anyways, so I have these three files here. This one you see right here is the original raw file, and this next one is the after I edited, and this one is after Photoshop, and I'm going to walk you through that process of getting to this final image. So let's just go ahead and back up and start with the original raw file. I'm going to go ahead and create a virtual copy so I have something to work with, and let's just go ahead and look. Metadata, I have an ISO of 400, 17 millimeters, f11, and a 1/38 of a second. If I remember right, I'm pretty sure I shot this photo handheld, which would explain the higher ISO. Either way, so let's just start working this photo. I usually start with my lens correction, so I'm going to remove chromatic aberration and enable the profile correction just as a place to start. Then let's go ahead and start with the exposure. So I need to bring this up a little bit. About right there is probably good for now. I'm actually going to bring the contrast down some for my own personal taste, just because this is a very high dynamic situation between the bright highlights from the sun flare that I created and the shadows down here. The f11 is also why I chose to shoot at that aperture, because they've created this nice sun flare. So we're gonna bring these highlights down to kind of get some of that detail back, and we're going to bring the shadows up. And right here for now looks good. And really bringing your shadows up, that is the hugest part with shooting raw. If you would have shot this in JPEG, this literally would not even be possible. So if you're not shooting in raw, I mean, I guess technically you don't have to, but if you're not shooting in raw, you're not going to be able to do anything like this. So we're going to go ahead and adjust the whites a little bit and bring the blacks down some and regain some of that contrast. And now we're going to go ahead and go into the tone curve, speak English, really quickly. And this is how I'm going to add back in my contrast. So we're going to go ahead and darken some of those shadows, bring those highlights down. That looks good for now. So if you notice here on this tone curve, after I did my adjusting on here, it's creating this sort of S pattern, and as a general rule that works. I mean, obviously that doesn't work for every photo, and you don't just have to always create an S curve in your tone curve when you're editing, but usually that's about what naturally happens when you're lifting your shadows and preserving some of your highlights. So I'm gonna go over to vibrance, bring up some of this vibrance a little bit, and I like to drop the saturation personally. Okay, now, and once you get that finished, once you start to play with your HSL, your hue, saturation, and luminance tab, that's really where you're going to kind of custom customize your photo to like your feeling and your sort of vibe. So I'm going to select this identifier tool right here and just kind of like let that play around. And if you look down here with your colors, it's going to start jumping around and highlighting what colors you're actually going to be affecting in the photo. So if we look here, I've got some magentas, a little red, blues, some greens, and yellows and oranges. So that's kind of where I'm going to start about what I'd want to do. So if I want to do affect these greens, I can move this green slider back and forth to get the kind of green that I want. And I don't think I want this lime sort of green in here, so I'll back that off a little bit, maybe a more yellow green. I think that looks good. And a lot of what you're doing is you can honestly just play with your sliders. So you go from one extreme to the other and decide if you kind of like what that's doing, and if you do, you can kind of keep it, and if you don't, you just adjust the other way. So not too complicated. I think that looks pretty good. So that's getting me pretty close to where I want to be. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and really make this photo pop, and I'm going to do that with my radial filter here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply this radial filter right here and just kind of change the shape of it a little bit to kind of suit my needs for this sunburst. And I am going to just go ahead and add a little bit of temperature to it, a little warm temperature to it, until I get to where I like. And I'm going to go down here and invert, because I just noticed that it's affecting outside. And the way you want to check what your filter is affecting is by pressing O on your keyboard. So you see here that it's everything outside of the circle is red. Well, right now I want to affect the inside of the circle, so I'm going to go ahead and click over here and click invert, and you'll see that the red has now moved to the inside of the circle. And then I will press O again to turn that off, and now you see here that the temperature, I'll go ahead and click that off, the temperature of the sun flare is changing, which is what I want to do. And you can kind of just, again, if you want to just play with your sliders to see what you would do and what that slider is actually affecting, you can just do that. So cool is obviously not the way I personally want to go. So and then also I believe that that's a little bit too warm. So you just want to find a nice, happy, sweet spot. And I think somewhere around there is pretty good. And then I'm also going to bring back some highlights. And adjust the whites a little bit in that section. So I think that looks pretty good. And also I'm going to go ahead and add another radial filter down here below, because now that I really enjoy this warm kind of tonality here up in the highlights, I also kind of want there to be some warm tones down here in the shadows to go ahead and match, because as you see now, there's kind of it almost doesn't look as natural now, at least to me. I don't think it does. So I am going to go ahead and add a little texture down here and just bring that temperature up till I feel like it matches a little bit more. So as you can tell, we've warmed this photo up quite a bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and come back in here, and actually I think that's a little too warm now. I'm gonna bring this back down. Maybe about right there, looks pretty good. So, okay, not too bad. And we're gonna go ahead and add some texture to the overall photo. I usually like to come back to texture and clarity and dehaze sometime at the end because these are some really powerful sliders, so I like to get my main edits kind of set in place before I start fooling around with that. So you can go ahead and add a little bit of texture, not too much clarity and dehaze. I'm really gonna do too much. I definitely prefer the texture slider over the clarity. It's a little bit more selective and not so crunchy. I do want to go ahead and add in a brush to get a little bit more texture and sharpness out of the branches down here. Just kind of bring those up a little bit. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm pretty close to kind of where I want to be. I definitely could spend a lot more time on this, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to try to make this pretty quick. The one things that I notice now, and what happens a lot when you do photos with sun flares in them, is that because I shot this handheld, I didn't have an opportunity to cover the sun with my finger. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom here, and you'll see a lot of this artifacting and flaring that happens, and that's just a characteristic of shooting with a wide angle lens. So I want to clean that up. And also there's going to be some down here, some flaring and artifacting that I'm going to want to clean up, and I think there's some right here, just some color fringing, and that's pretty natural. I do really love Lightroom, but Lightroom, in my opinion, is not very good at doing that. And also, this tree right here in the middle, I find a little bit distracting. It's in the way. So maybe we're going to go ahead and go into Photoshop and remove those. So I'm going to right click on this image and go up to Edit in Photoshop. Okay, here we go. Not too bad. We got that open pretty quick. Okay, so let's start with going and removing some of these. So I'm going to just go ahead and unlock the photo so I can make my edits. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and first I'm going to start with this flare down here. I'm using Alt and up on the mouse wheel to zoom in. So you hold Alt and just scroll on the mouse wheel, and that will zoom in and out of your photograph. And for me, Photoshop can be very intimidating, but it's really not as soon as you figure out some of the basic tools. So really what I'm going to do is use the spot healing brush, which is J. So you just hit J and it'll go to your spot healing brush. I'm just going to come down here and just paint along this flare here. And the healing brush, spot healing brush, the J tool, it automatically selects pixels from the photograph for you to be able to kind of heal up some of those areas. So that's done a pretty good job. So I'm gonna come over here to this little blue fringing. Let's just kind of use the brush to get rid of that. And I mean, nothing's perfect. So usually what I'll do is I will use the J tool and then come over to the clone stamping tool, which is S. And with that, you select where you want to clone. So I want to clone down here and just kind of help clean that up a little bit. There we go, and that looks a little bit better, a little bit more natural. So we're going to go back to the J tool to kind of get rid of some of these flares here. It's not doing the best job with this, and that's okay, because again, we're going to go back and clone stamp it when we're done. So, and with the clone stamp, you press Alt Alt, and then you click on an area you would like to select, and then that's what determines where you're actually sampling. So the clone stamp tool, you have a little bit more control, which is nice when you need it. See a little bit down here. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So now probably the hardest part is going to be getting rid of this tree. So we're gonna zoom in and just get about a circle. With a circle, you can use your brackets to make it bigger or smaller. So I'm just going to go ahead and select about a size of the tree trunk. You don't really ever want to be doing more than what you need to be doing. It really helps out the program to only select what it needs to get rid of. So I like to make little small selections at a time. I find that that's really helpful in helping the program. So you see it's done a pretty darn good job of getting rid of that trunk in this area. And this is where I'm going to show you how. So I've switched over to the clone stamping tool now. I'm going to make a selection just right here close. The tones are going to be mostly the same. And that is going to just help this area look a little bit more natural now. I mean, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but make that look pretty believable. When you come back out, I mean, you can't even tell. I mean, you can already see that, you know, from here, you can't even tell that the tree was there. Except for obviously we still have about half of it to get rid of, so let's just go ahead and do that. We'll go back over to the J tool. And that looks pretty good. So again, like, this isn't finished, this is pretty rough. I mean, there's definitely some more stamping that I would like to do, but I think for the purposes of this video, that is pretty good. And just to give you a general idea of like what you can do with a raw file if you want to use Lightroom and Photoshop. Together they're just like a very powerful combination of programs to help you get to the images you want. And when you're done with the image and you think it looks good and you like the way everything is kind of like moving together, you just go ahead and press Control S, and then that photo will send back into Lightroom automatically on its own. That's the great part about working with Adobe programs, is that they are built to work together. Okay, so hopefully after watching this video you have learned the importance of shooting in RAW and how that can help you unlock a lot of really awesome things in your photography. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you have any comments or anything, you just go ahead and leave those down in the comment section. I will get back to you. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because there's a lot of cool content coming up on the channel. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye.